everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on innovation. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Smith, Mr. Eriks, and Professor David J. Kelly. First, I would like to give chance Professor David Smith. Mr. David. David
Thank you
Smith.
so much, Sharif. There is a lot of stuff going on around Innovation Sprint, which is really good because today, one of the biggest drivers in business is going to be speed to market. And speed to market is a major driver of today's economy and business. And one of the new techniques really looking at how do you become more innovative, more creative, is something called the Innovation Sprint. And the Innovation Sprint is really a technique to take a particular amount of time from days to a week or so and spend investigating very hard new technologies, new ideas. And, uh, and there's really no true blueprint for an innovation sprint, like there's blueprints for development sprints and other ones like that. Uh, you don't need to finish with a prototype or be at the cutting edge. Instead, you should be pushing the boundaries of the company's knowledge with a goal of adding values and how that can be done. So a couple of the areas in that is one of them is you identify the areas of interest for the business and kind of begin to put together a summary, a brief for each of it. You take team members, employees, even partners, and according to kind of their backgrounds and interests, match them in teams. They work together, achieve some goals within a particular timeline, and then they come together to uh, present at the end. So this is similar to what you see with hackathons with writing code, but instead of writing code and developing a program, it's really evolved to come up with innovative ideas and to let you explore new ways of thinking, create new ideas, and really push it forward to being creative. Um, innovation sprints really are looking a way to take an intensive period of time in which individuals and the teams break into these activities and work together. Some of the challenges you typically address in innovation sprints is how to improve and strengthen business ideas. How do you identify and overcome critical challenges? How do you spot gaps in your capability to innovate? What competencies and capabilities do you need? What are some of the assumptions inside your company that might be hindering progress? Uh, a key output of an innovation sprint is you clarify the areas of risk and uncertainty, and you develop a business idea with the team behind it and begin to present it forward to get there. So there's so many different areas you can do these in, from customer insights, customer experience, improvements, process products, services, and others, new products, new markets, new technologies. So again, a wide range of areas, but this might be a good introduction to it, and we can go back. Later I can talk about some of the techniques you typically see used in these, but this is probably a good start to let it go ahead and be further developed.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
So, sprints, the idea of sprinting is nothing new, a fast race. And we do that in development all the time. In fact, in Scrum, you almost do a lot of that every week of where are we going, where are we going. The biggest challenge for me in this idea of innovation sprints is the infrastructure of a company to support it. Because what you're saying is stop thinking like you're doing for hours, days. So, we could do a sprint here. We could say, all right, World Talent Economy Forum, let's do an innovative sprint. And we could go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We could do a sprint. And the idea is to kind of shake things up, think differently, get out of where your brain normally is. And that's hard for an organization to do. So, and the other thing to keep in mind is that, while, when you're thinking of things like Scrum in these cycles, you're talking about products. When you're talking about an innovative sprint, often you hear the word planning. Sometimes they talk about innovation and planning. And one of the things there is really scenarios. So it's very tough to come up with a 5-year plan for a lot of things today. Like if you're doing your 5-year plan for quantum computing or biologic computers, you'd have a tough time having a pretty accurate 5-year plan. So how do you adjust your planning? Well, a lot of that is scenario based. So for example, David Kelly could say, well, what if we did this? And then David Smith could say, well, that would mean either left or right. And I could say, well, what about that? So you can start looking for critical paths that you could take and what they might be. And so as you're doing possible maps or possibility mapping as it comes along, when you reach these, you're better prepared to do that. So, and part of, I think, these innovation sprints is looking at your ability to innovate itself. For example, spot gaps. You're able to identify gaps in your ability to innovate. Why can't we innovate? Well, we don't have the training, we don't have the resources, our systems aren't set up. So an innovative sprint can be used just to determine your ability to do innovation in general. It can also identify challenges that you might not be looking for, because challenges today can come from technology, it can come from politics, it can come from economic, sociocultural. There's a lot of things. And I think innovative sprints are a time to test your assumptions, because a lot of time we go in business like, in doing things for a government. I remember our sales team had this idea: admirals never buy anything. Don't talk to them. They don't buy anything. I ended up actually selling a lot of software because of what Admiral said. So I would disagree. But the whole problem is that was what one of the leaderships, and everybody just repeated that over and over. There's a lot of things that were repeated. So testing assumptions is a really good thing to do in an innovative sprint. Also, we talked about scenario. That's one way to identify risks and uncertainties. What are we pretty sure of? What aren't we sure of? And we may not even be able to do anything about it, but identifying is that area where we should focus. When you do things like SWOT analysis, part of that SWOT is opportunities and threats. So this is a good time to look at opportunities, which means not doing what we've always done. It's what could we do differently. So it's not under that category if you're just saying, well, we're doing this, let's just go get another bigger customer. It's like, no, what would we need to change? That's a good time to look at that. But threats are, what should we monitor? What triggers? How would we know if a threat is coming? It's a good time to do that. It also is a good opportunity to start not only come up with an idea, but aligning a team behind it. So a company that I worked with actually had their own internal stock market. So all employees in the company's got, this virtual money that they did, which I had to do with their money for innovation. And anybody could spend so much time of their week working on any of their projects. And so it was almost like a stock market. You could put your ideas out there. So for example, I could put an idea there and David Smith may go, oh, I like that, put some money. Dr. Sharif, you may put some money from David Kelly's idea, and you get this alignment with these ideas, and then that's where they would actually put the real money. So people could donate their time and their virtual money. So that's an idea of aligning a team, not just with an idea, but figuring out how to align a team behind it. And it's an opportunity, especially if you get leadership involved, to get buy-in, because a lot of ideas are great ideas, but they die because you don't get buy-in. So an innovation sprint is a good opportunity for the leadership to be part of that and get buy-in early. So I think market risks are good to look at, and I think implementation risks, potential, what we could do, and that's a problem just to do implementation. So there's some idea. I'm a huge fan of that, but again, a lot of people don't like to think that way. It's like, come up with a plan, staff it. Let's not move ahead till everything's figured out and we know where we're going. In a disruptive world, it's very tough to align those innovators with those people who, keep the lights on. So that to me is the biggest problem, is engaging the different personalities and types of people in there.
Thank you. Professor David J. Kelly, what you want to share about innovation sprint? And beside that, if you want to share something about AGI, because our audience has huge interest on artificial intelligence, and if you share your view about innovation, maybe it will be interesting.
Well, I think just speaking about innovation in general, it's one of the reasons for wanting diversity in the workplace and diversity in organizations is because the wider diversity of ideas you have, the larger your pool you have to draw from for innovation. I know that in doing like innovation sprints, a lot of times I've been involved in these kind of retreats where we go and work through different scenarios with varying techniques, trying to come up with new ways of doing something or new radical ideas, and then testing them. And I think as that relates to AI, part of the trick is how do you get a machine to innovate, and that's kind of the hard problem with AGI, or one of them, to be able to innovate. And so we've developed some algorithms for that, but you still are limited by the pool of ideas that you have to draw from to come up with different combinations to be able to generate that stuff. I think even as AGI technology gets more robust, that's kind of the limiting factor is the stuff, the data you can feed it. Coming up with something that's truly new is harder than it looks, and that's again why at least in my experience, driving that diversity of ideas is kind of the key.
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Yeah, as we said before, there is a lot of ways to begin to look at these innovation sprints and how to go there. And I love Eric jumping into what we do on the development side. I have multiple development sprints going every week, and what's interesting with those is that with my different development teams, we use different methodologies for the different sprints we use in development, from classic agile methodologies to one called deliberate agile, which is kind of taking some of the best principles of waterfall and combining it with true agile, where particularly we have compliance and regulatory environments in place there. But the ability to take an innovation sprint, the sprint methodology from the agile process, and really pull it over and use it in an area like this is I find very interesting, because it shows that the ability for a corporation to be flexible, to be agile is becoming more and more important. COVID pandemic actually demonstrated that very much so, as we looked at the companies that did best are those that have an agile mindset and can adapt and readapt pretty easily and move forward. Part of what I have done in my past is we've used a methodology called 6 Views of the Future to do part of this as we've tried to implement this type of innovation around the world. And what we've tended to do with our 6 views of the future is look at the future as an extrapolator, pattern analyst, goal analyst, counterpuncher, intuitor, and artist, and use this type of framework as a way to focus innovative thought, to focus diligence on how to do it, and to factor out error. One of the big challenges you have when you do an innovation sprints is there's very little diligence around it. There's no semblance of, is this really doable? Is this, are the risk factors manageable and like that? And but on the other hand, innovation sprints are great ideas for pulling people together and say, what can be possible? What can we do? Where can we go? And how can we work in the company? The other real benefit from utilizing some innovation sprints is this impact on the corporate culture and the impact that you're involving more and more of your employees and even partners in some instance in trying to plan for the future and work for the future and see where innovation can go. And often what will happen is an idea that comes out of an innovation sprint will tend to morph and change and eventually become a product down the road or enhance existing products because some of the same principles can be taken back and be applied to it. And then you will see that change as you go forward, and more of that will become part of the culture, hopefully. And that's where everyone's trying to go. So, Dr. Sharif, I hope this helps some too.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
There's a lot of companies and a lot of cultures around the world where, when you talk about the term of high power distance, where you don't question your boss, and that's where all planning comes from. It comes from, and I've worked with a lot of companies like that, where the directors will go in the room, come up with some idea, assure because they came up with it, it's a great idea and it's going to work. Then they roll out this idea. And because they didn't have all the information or something they didn't see, it doesn't work. And then sometimes they'll beat up the crew and say, you're not doing it right. And have training, talks. And then eventually they scrap the whole idea and they come up with a completely new idea, which they planned themselves. So in this world, there's too much going on. And if you've got a diverse staff, then there's a lot of ideas that need to be incorporated. So I think the thing that David Smith said hits the nail on the head, and that the biggest thing is changing the corporate culture to realize that we're all strategists, we're all innovators. Even if you look at 7-Elevens, a lot of things 7-Eleven stores does is because some store franchise owner, some employee said, hey, how about this? And they do it. So that in today's disruptive market, you need to get that idea of it's okay to come up with new ideas. But if you come up with new ideas and everybody just immediately stomps on it, nobody's going to start contributing new ideas. I knew one of the reasons I like the startup community so much is in the corporate world, you could come up with some idea and let's say, oh, we really should have fur-lined toilet seats. The corporate world, without even thinking, even if it was an idea, like let's do web services, jump on you and tell you 20 reasons why that is a stupid idea. And when I went up in the startup community, there were organizations, people I worked with, that no matter how stupid the idea was, nobody would ever say that's a stupid idea. They go, oh, that's an interesting idea. How are you going to test that? How are you going to find out? And it's that culture of how are we going to how are we going to test whether this idea is a good one? How are we going to consider it? But even more importantly, how are we going to put resources behind it if it is a good idea? I mentioned that one company that I worked with where they actually had a budget to do that, and they let the employees in a stock market basically vote and put effort behind what they were actually going to fund and go through. So I think the number one factor is changing the corporate culture to the idea that new ideas are good, innovation can be good. But even if you've got people thinking that way, it has to be encouraged and supported. But let's face it, if you're going to come with a lot of ideas, a lot of them are going to be bad. That's just the nature of ideas. If you're going to write a lot of books are going to be bad. Start a company, a lot of companies are going to be bad. So you need to be realistic about that too. And that's one thing the innovation sprint can do is say, okay, how do we look through the weave through the chaff there? How do we find the good stuff in there? Because that is a challenge in itself, which brings another point. And not only building that culture of innovation, but this is a time to get your teams talking together. Because one of the big problems business has is, I've worked at a place where sales don't talk to marketing. Marketing doesn't talk to production, and production doesn't talk to customer success or support, and they don't talk to each other. And yet, a company is like a car. All those pieces are important. They have to work together. So this is a good chance for cross-functional teams to come together and actually, you can have a good idea from marketing, but somebody in engineering might have ideas. Yeah, but how are we going to build that? And that's a good idea to get in. So I think culture, creating a culture, using cross-functional teams and building a process to not only come up with those ideas, but evaluate those ideas and figuring out how to move forward, I think is critical. Because we've all been to team events where you go together, people do things and nothing ever happens to them, and people stop caring about team events.
Thank you. Mr. David Jekali, do you believe that in education system, is there any process of developing innovation ability, or how does
I
it work?
I think it's possible, but as a rule, I don't think they do a good job of teaching innovation as a skill. Uh, Certainly, none of the universities I've been involved with or taught at, that's not really a thing. Um, I think I would love to see that kind of thing taught. I think one of the biggest uh, factors I think that has helped me in in building innovation as part of a culture, as the others have mentioned, is to learn to listen to everyone. It's the lowest guy in the totem pole might, heck, if the janitor is exposed to what you're doing, I would include him. I mean, these are all human brains, and the more we can pick from all of them, the better we theoretically the larger that pool is that I mentioned earlier. Um, and I'd love to see that sort of stuff taught in school. Whether it's in the framework of agile with agile sprints, but innovation I think is really kind of the driving force behind humanity and civilization. If without innovation we would still be knocking sticks together and rocks and uh, who knows? We where would we be without innovation?
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Who do you want to go, Sharif?
Yes, David Smith, you. and we are discussing about the innovation procedure in education system.
Well, yeah, education is ripe for this type of innovation as you look at it. And you're seeing these settings used very broadly. Again, going back to the pandemic illustrated very clearly that part of the education system is broken and it needs change on it. Uh, and some of the innovation ideas that can come out of this would be very beneficial to the education process and how it can be used. Um, Let me also look at how we can look this in place and begin to do the other elements of it and bring it there. I want to go back to what I was saying earlier with some of the techniques. What education lacks more than business is they lack the tools really to be able to put underneath an innovation sprint process. You heard Eric mention earlier scenarios. Scenarios are an important part of it. You need to look at how you begin to do forecast curves, like a Gamma chart or a Fisher-Price curve. You need to look at how do you do stakeholder analysis as part of that, how you can understand people's care abouts, how can you go out and understand what are the key messages that are required for it, and look at the leaders. How can you begin to pull out of the box thinking into it, doing things like morphological analysis and other approaches like that? And the key thing with an innovation sprint, whether it's in education or business, is you have to use multiple of these techniques and multiple of these views for these to be successful. I can see innovation sprints heavily impacting education, just like we've seen it impact different types of businesses as well. I also, Dr. Sharif, believe that we can use the same process with a modified scale with different stakeholders to even look at the governmental processes, because governance in the governmental process and interaction with the citizens, I believe, is on the cusp of change in many of our countries today, as we've seen through the international press. So, Sharif, very applicable to those areas. But again, you have to make sure you balance the underlying techniques that are used in the innovation sprint, because they don't just happen by themselves. You've got to use some process and techniques to make them happen.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
The biggest challenge with education is the educational structure itself. Education, academic universities are very structured from the dean and provost down to the professors in different levels. And so there's kind of a, a built-in motivation for universities to stay the way they are. Now, under that umbrella, you can go out and get funds, do this research, you can teach innovation. But the biggest challenge is universities and education using what they found out. So if you look at the studies that talk about, oh, here's how you motivate employees, and then the university itself doesn't use the results of that to motivate their employees. Reading one of those the other day. I was working with an organization that was, enrollment was dropping like crazy. They were in danger of risk, and some of the professors there had started programs and even got funding for autonomous vehicles, both air, land, and underwater. They got game and even through an effort, got out and got sponsorship from major companies like Google, Qualcomm to set up an innovative classroom of the future, and they were going to do it for free. Needless to say, when it came to push to shove, the board said, no, we feel more comfortable doing what we've done for the last 30 years, and that university is no longer, does not exist. It's one of the early pioneers, and it just couldn't change. So it's amazing that universities can often be immune to doing what they did today, what they themselves discover. The other thing is launching an innovative sprint, I think, is really important because there's a vicious cycle where people look and you get a bad result. So you get bad thoughts. Because you have bad thoughts, you get bad feelings because that you act. And so you can sabotage it. So you have to inject it with some results. And innovation sprints can often fail to deliver meaningful results if you haven't set expectations, figure out what the result is and what you're going to do with it. The other thing is you can have an innovation sprint and not resource it. You're going to pay people salaries, or what are you going to give people access to use that then? Or do you have a budget or resources to do anything with those ideas? So you have to give people the time to do it. You have to get the resources. You have to set the expectations, because if the scope is too big or the expectations are too big, then people walk away with that. And then again, the big idea that universities often have is that transitioning from an idea to actually implementation within an organization itself. So, so often you'll see a department gets really good at that, and sometimes you'll see a group get really good at that, and sometimes they do whole centers, and universities really take off. But in general, you'll see in the academic realm that why you want to track innovative thinkers like we have here and all that, when it comes to actually transforming education itself, they don't do that. And I guess there's some other challenges. We talked about transitioning from prototype to an idea to implement, but the big thing is, how do you measure that? So part of your innovation sprint says, here's a great idea, but part of that should be, how do we know if it's a success? Like if you say, oh, this will make our employees happier or make education better, how do you know? A lot of times those results aren't clear. And when you try and implement those ideas, there's no means to say we succeeded or we failed. And there should be an expectation that this could be a test, and if it fails, that's okay. It's like the Edison, oh yeah, I just learned another way not to make a light bulb. So those are real key things in that, is that you need to get a good experience so that people want to do it again, because it doesn't take too many cycles of an innovation sprint before people go, this is a waste of time. But again, you have to set the expectations, scope, fund the results, figure out a way to do those results and measure those results. So, otherwise it's just like playing basketball without a scoreboard. A lot of activity, but it just doesn't seem like we're going anywhere.
Thank you. Mr. David J. Kelly, do you believe that for working environment as artificial intelligence and many technology integrated right now, so if employee have innovation ability, they will be helpful for the organizations, or how innovations actually they can apply in the organization?
So let me restate the question. So you're asking how AI can, innovation in AI or AI can help companies implement innovation?
Yes.
But I think AI is a long way from replacing human innovation. It's what we do with AI. AI is another tool, but even in the realm of AGI, where you could realistically talk about a system innovating on its own, we're still a long ways from that. Innovation needs to be driven right now, driven by people and the people on the team, and through ideas and ideally a structured approach to innovation in a way that they don't throw out ideas before they've figured out which ones are good or not. And it's not something that you can make AI do for you right now.
Can you share some of your experience about uh, Chat GPT? I think this is very popular right now. Everybody want to know more about Chat GPT.
Well, ChatGPT is a language model. It's not AGI on its own. It's maybe a component of AGI, but it's not implementing an entire cognitive architecture. So it's not going to develop its own goals and wake up tomorrow and try to take over the world. It's not. It's synthesizing ideas based on what it's been fed, and it's how a neural network works. And I think it's a great resource, and certainly something we use language models in our AGI research, but it's not on its own going to it's just again, and it's another tool. Certainly it could be used in innovative ways, and in and of itself GPT-3 was a great innovation, but I don't think it's really innovative as or creating innovation on its own as much as you can use it to synthesize ideas from the pool of stuff you fed into it. But it's not going to make those cognitive leaps that humans can.
Well, but I think Chat GPT is a way of sorting through a ton of information, looking for things that are consistent, inconsistent, and it's going to put it together in lots of ways really fast. So it comes up with some ideas. Now, granted, some of those ideas are going to be really stupid, and Chat GPT has the opportunity to make up stuff. It sounds very authoritative and confident. Oh, yes. And Dr. Sharif on his around the trip world tour in a gyroscope, no. So Chat GPT will do that. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But if we were to try ourselves and analyze thousands of conversations and pull together the pieces and say, what are the possible connections and not, it's going to save us a lot of time and maybe come some new ideas. But I agree with David Kelly. You got to take it with a grain of salt. It's not an authority. But it is great at sorting through tons of information that would take us forever to sort through.
That's true.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you, Mr. David Smith. What do you want to say, Mr. David Smith?
Well, I love the discussion about the ChatGPT. I was also very good as it's applicable here, because it's some tools like that that can let us begin to do more with accounts with areas like this. In many industries, speed of innovation is going to be, speed of innovation is going to be one of the next big breakthrough areas. With globalization disruptions, with logistic disruptions, and the fact that we're digitally connected, these are really the elements to get us moving towards more of an innovative culture and what we can do there. I can tell you in healthcare, several of the speeches I've given lately in healthcare and many of the discussions, the entire industry is beginning to look at speed of innovation. And healthcare is not an industry where there's been much involvement on speed, on innovation. It's been more driven by individuals or companies trying to push it and not really teams of people. So you're going to see this. Again, going back to the concept of innovation sprint, it's a generic technique that can be adapted in really any industry and can be applied that way. And we often talk about innovation in your programs, Sharif. Innovation is a driver for where we're going. Innovation is an equalizer. I can innovate as a one person, two person, entrepreneurially driven startup. I can be a multinational corporation and innovate, even though it's harder because of the culture. But innovation is going to be the driver. And because of all the breakups and all the disruptions from the pandemic, all the disruptions from the war in Ukraine and others, it's going to be really uh, one of the next things to make differences between winners and losers in the new economy. So, Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eric?
Well, I think potentially one of the biggest innovation and innovation sprints is the ability to tie customers and customer testing in into a short period of time. I know like Google and Slack and others use that methodology, and where you're designing ideas for an interface, for example, and they can even prototype and have potential customers ready or put things out and test it. So you can actually do testing very quickly. And one of those comes from like the book, The Right It. And, in their innovation testing, they want to know if somebody will buy a product. So they get, websites to put that product up and give them. So, they put that idea right there up with solid companies. I mean, one group had a product and they were trying to do innovation for how do we market or sell this thing. And somebody says, I wonder if it'll work with IKEA. So they just walked to IKEA and put it on the shelves and see if people would pick it up and start heading toward the register. They had to stop and say, no, that's a promotion. You can have that for free. But they just wanted to see, hey, if we do this, will people buy it? So that is you can add those very simple tests in there where you can say, will people actually respond to that idea? So you can either have customers represented like BlinkUX does that. They bring in customers and in sprints test all kinds of ideas between the companies and customers right there, and studios designed to collect data. On the other hand, you can just go out and create your own test without a market standing by. Just go to places where they're there, go to a Facebook group and put stuff in, or create a website. So I think bringing customers in could be one of the most innovative ways. What if you have something like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, your idea goes right to there and says, will you buy this thing? See if people will buy it. I know, like when you go to those as seen on TV, things, and you buy this device or this product, and then it says 6 weeks for delivery, and you're saying, why should it take 6 weeks? Amazon delivers things overnight now. Why 6 weeks? And you find out that's 6 weeks to build. They're only going to build it if they get enough people buy it. And they just showed you a prototype. So there's a kind of innovation right there. And say, put it on TV, through TV commercials and see if people will buy it. One of the biggest, first one was, will people buy cars on the web? Before there's now, yeah, of course. But the first cars sold on the web, nobody knew. So if you want to spend tons of time building a website, putting cars on it, doing the funding, no, they just built a static website. And if somebody ordered a car, they just went and bought it. So they just found cars available, just copied it into the website. They didn't even make any money. But what they found out is, well, what do you know? People will actually buy a car on the internet. And so now you can invest money to move that idea further. I think it goes in this idea of not only do you have to have an innovation sprint, you have to be able to deliver something, even if it's an idea, and you have to be able to implement that, and you have to be able to measure these ideas. And I think David Kelly's idea that discussion that you have to actually use the process itself to sort through the chaff is important, because a lot of ideas may have challenges, or the timing may be wrong. It might be a great idea, but it turns out the timing is off. So you need to use a lot of factors to evaluate ideas. Is it is it going to fit the market? Will people pay for it? Is it doable? Can we build it? Is the timing right? There's a lot of questions, but I think that's the biggest challenge of innovation sprints. Is the biggest danger is people just doing them because I heard they're cool, and then not getting anything out of it because it's not really planned and executed well.
Thank you. Professor David Jekyll, what's your concluding remarks or what is your advice for our audience, specifically if they want to improve their innovation ability?
Well, I think be open to new ideas. Look at, talk to people, get connected with people, share ideas, um, talk about crazy scenarios. The wider your experience or your contact base is, I think the more you have to work with, and the more likely it is that uh, you can um, you can innovate. This you certainly having as a company, having a process and a structure in place is also something that's great to learn how to do and apply it in business. But I think innovation is one of the things that will be the very last thing that we automate with UI or AI, uh, and it's the people who are able to do the best innovation uh, will be will be the ones that are most successful.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Agree with all that's been said. That innovation is very important. Innovation sprints are only one of the tools that you can use to innovate, and there's many other tools beside it as well. Uh, a company that does not look towards the future, that does not look towards not only innovation, but even incremental and distinctive improvements on their products, are going to not be in business for a long, long time. Um, with the disruptions in the global logistic change today, with some of the disruptions in the financial marketplace, with changing buying patterns, with the fact that we're seeing really 7 generations buying today, which is a unique thing in the world. The world is ripe for new innovation. It's ripe for new products, new services to take its place. And again, an innovation sprint is just one of the tools in the toolbox that these companies should have. And you should use this full suite of the tools in your toolbox to really look at how to better meet the needs and the care abouts of your customers, of your constituencies, and others. But because an innovation sprint is agile, and an innovation sprint really does not have a framework today, doesn't have a form. It's one that is easy to adapt to many industries, Sharif, and I think it's one of the things which is easy to try to dip your toe in as a company and see if this couple of days to a week to week 2 week type of hackathon on innovation really can make sense in your company. And from it, does it make sense to go and use some of the more formal methods of innovation after you try this and see how it works within your culture? So Sharif, great idea to try, but it's only one of the tools in the toolbox. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
The biggest risk of an innovation sprint is having a bad innovation sprint and leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So I think the first thing is making sure that you have leadership and corporate buy-in, that here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's what we expect to get out of it. Then making sure that you have a leadership team to run it, making sure there are clear goals and objectives for why we're doing it. Make sure that you gather the right people for the problem you're solving, cross-functional, most likely. Make sure that you have data available that you might need. Making sure that you have come out of there with metrics to decide whether the innovation sprint itself was a success, but also those outcomes are a success. And you also need to create a very safe environment so that people aren't afraid to talk. You put your supervisor in there and everybody nods their head and say, yeah, what she said. I'm not, and so you need, this knowledge comes from wisdom comes from aggregating all these independent thoughts. And so keeping the thought independent and open is, I think, one of the biggest challenge. And I guess the other thing is you have to realize, like David Smith said, is it's not just this one thing, open up the recipe and go, because companies are different, markets are different. So you have to continually innovate and refine your innovation sprint and your innovative sprint process.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. This is very interesting discussions. Definitely innovation is important. We always emphasize on different innovations. The World Talent Economy Forums also focus on these particular issues. I just want to share with you the two good news. One, coming Friday, we developed 300 entrepreneurs in Bangladesh, and all of the entrepreneurs financially they get succeed. So we have a very special sessions with our entrepreneur. Definitely, it will be offline. It's in Bangladesh. And second things with B Lab, World Talent Economy Forum, we are launching B Lab Dhaka, where 750 Japanese companies supporting this lab, and hopefully through this process with uh, Dhaka and Tokyo, we can make more collaboration and more innovations. We want more collaborations. We are open for doing any kind of partnership because we are solving many problems. Tomorrow we have very interesting collaborations with a specific district where we have 2 million people, and we are helping these 2 million people to solve their drinking waters, energy problems, housing problem, healthcare problem. So all of your support will be helpful for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you, Mr. Eric, Mr. David Jekali, and Mr. David Smith for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.